Hello and welcome back to yet another episode of Vivid's Library. Today's topic is none other than Philza Minecraft himself. Today we'll be talking about his character, his backstory, how he met his fledglings, and anything else I find relatively important about his character. Starting us off, Philza is one of the oldest vampires in existence, being one of the first vampires turned by Kristen. Kristen is referred to the mother of all vampires and also referred to as the goddess of death. Hence why they say by the goddess or something along those lines in the fic. Kristen was Philza's sire and also the sire of the other vampires that she turned that have yet to be named. But one of the vampires she did turn was XD, who is this AU's version of Dream XD and the predecessor of the XD coven. He originated it and named it after himself. And Philza is obviously XD's brother, and they weren't exactly close. They did not have a good relationship, and yeah, so Philza made his own coven first, called the First Empire, hence why it's the first. Philza's age is not specified, but he's been around since basically the dawn of humanity. He is incredibly old, like he's seen ancient Greece and for the Romans, the Ottoman War. He's seen everything. There's nothing he really hasn't seen, and he's incredibly wise and experienced because of that. But he's still absolutely awful at telling ages. So Phil's first fledgling was Nikki. He met Nikki at Temple of Athena, and he didn't tell her he was a vampire, but she ended up figuring it out herself, and she came to him and asked if he could turn her into a vampire because she believed he had appeared in her life as a gift from the goddess she worshipped, being Athena. And Phil, being lonely, decided to agree to this, and he turned her into a vampire when she was roughly 24 years old. And that marked his first ever baby. That was his first kiddo. His second fledgling was Techno. Techno was, we've explored this a little bit in a past episode, but Techno was a soldier in the Trojan War, and he was supposed to die, but Phil was drawn into the battle by the scent of blood, and he wanted to know what the frick the humans were doing. And he saw that, well, there was this kid, being Techno, who was like 19, who was obviously going to die, and his little fatherly instincts kicked in, and he turned Techno into a vampire. And that's how Techno and Nikki became really close, because they was the first fledglings of Philza, and they became, like, really close. And probably one of the only healthy sibling relationships in this entire thing. My bad, fam. Now for Wilbur. Wilbur was his last fledgling that he turned, and he turned Wilbur around 1912 in London, where Wilbur was a musician who got mugged, because he lived in the like around the place where Jack the Ripper was active. Let's just say that, because I forgot the name. Yeah, my bad. And Phil found him, thankfully, and decided to turn him into a vampire because Wilbur saw him and said something along the lines of, "I don't want to die." And that tugged on Phil's heartstrings, so he made sure Wilbur didn't die. As you can see, he has a trend of adopting dying children. We'll go into different details on his grandchildren later, being Jack, Fundy, and Rambo. We'll go into those later. We'll get their backstories. We'll do that later in a later episode. Around 1.5 years ago, Fundy got kidnapped by Schlatt, and we'll eventually deep dive into how Fundy got kidnapped in Fundy's own episode. So obviously Philza has a strained relationship with Schlatt and his coven, because that's his grandson. Please give him back, Schlatt. A little known fact is Eret used to be a part of Phil's coven, but Eret left to go on his own way, and he ended up joining Schlatt's coven, Los Manberg. Well, Schlatt and Quackities, but you know what I mean. So Phil at least knows his grandson isn't being actively harmed, because Eret wouldn't let somebody who's related to Phil be tortured. Phil has a good relationship with Skeppy and Bad and the Badlands. He has a decent relationship with them, and they've been friends for a long, long time. Him and Bad go way back around the 17th century, around when Bad was turned, because Bad is old, but he's not as old as Phil. Phil is incredibly old. I think it's appropriate to mention all of the vampires who are coven heads are around 100 years old, and Dream is the youngest at, I believe, 116, while his brother Puns is 121, while all the others are at least 200 to 300 years old. Philza himself is known to be patient, but Dream always tests that patience, which is why he lost his temper so quickly in the first chapter. He does not take disrespect to his coven or his son or his sons or daughter well. He doesn't take disrespect of his family at all. He will put you in your place if you try to disrespect his family or his humans. Phil has interesting powers. His first one is he can summon a flock of crows that have very sharp teeth, and he can basically mind control them, or, well, not mind control, like thrall them into doing his bidding. So, like, they can deliver messages, they can attack people, they can be lookouts. Whatever he needs them to be, they will be. Obviously, he can thrall people or vampires as well, but they have to be weaker than him for him to be able to thrall them. And since he's so old, he's one of the strongest vampires to ever exist. So he can thrall basically anyone. Phil can also shapeshift, but he doesn't like doing it a lot because he says it makes his bones feel weird for a few weeks after. And that's kind of fair, because if I had to restructure my entire nervous system and my skeletal structure and my muscles and tissue, I would feel weird about it for a few weeks too. Phil is also a necromancer. He can reanimate corpses and bring them back to life. He is very good at this since he's been practicing for a long time. His only drawback is the more he summons, the weaker he himself becomes, because they take a good chunk of his power to be able to, move and fight and talk and do all sorts of stuff. Vampire powers are also genetic, so, like, for instance, Wilbur got the thralling power, except his is weaker because he's not, as old as Phil. He's a bit younger, well, not a bit, he's a lot younger than Phil, and he's, like, the youngest child. And Nikki got the shape-shifting power, but she also doesn't like shape-shifting for the same reason Phil doesn't like it. And Techno got an entirely unique power. We don't know how Techno got his. Well, I do. You don't, and you won't know for a while. Phil's relationship with Tommy is a bit strained. Phil wants to get close to Tommy. Phil wants Tommy to trust him and want to be around him. But he also understands somewhat that Tommy has a bad relationship with vampires. He doesn't really understand why. Well, he understands that it's probably something Dream did, but he doesn't understand, like, the full extent of the abuse. He suspects Dream has been beating on Tommy, and he's trying to find more proof for that theory. But he's had to do other stuff, like running the coven, which is why we don't really see him a lot and see more of Techno and Wilbur. But we'll get to see him more in future chapters. His relationship with Techno is quite good since Techno is his right hand. Techno took the job because Nikki didn't want it. She wanted to focus on other stuff. She wanted to focus on learning and doing stuff. And Techno was more so family oriented, so he was glad to take the role. And so him and Techno are really close. Him and Techno have been close for as long as Techno has been his fledgling. They've been together for hundreds upon maybe even thousands of years. His relationship with Nikki and Wilbur is also pretty good, but Nikki's has been estranged ever since she turned Jack into a fledgling. So him and Wilbur occasionally spend time together. They like playing music together since Phil picked up a lot of weird hobbies in his possibly millions of years of life. Again, Phil is incredibly old, and that's about all I got. So I thank you for checking in on this episode of Vivid's Library, and I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you tune in next time. Bye-bye!